to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into something that's, well, it's a huge contradiction. We're talking about a puzzle in the real estate market that just doesn't seem to make any sense. Like, it's defying the basic laws of economics.
All right, so let's get right to it. Here's the big mystery that has everyone, buyers, experts, you name it, scratching their heads. I mean, think about it. If fewer people are actually buying homes, shouldn't prices, drop? That's basic supply and demand, right? Well, it turns out the reality is way, way more complex than that.
So you've got this crazy split screen happening. On one side, you see home prices just climbing and climbing. I mean, it's a total nightmare for anyone trying to buy their first place. But then, on the other side, the number of homes actually being sold, it's dropping. This isn't your textbook supply and demand curve. No, this is a huge sign that the entire game is changing. So how do we make sense of this? To really figure out what's going on, we've got to look at our first major clue. And this is a big one because it shows why what's happening now is totally different from past market crashes, and why just sitting around waiting for prices to drop might be a really bad bet.
Okay, let's get one thing straight right away. This is not 2008 all over again. The big, crucial difference is that today's market isn't being fueled by a mountain of bad, irresponsible debt like it was back then. Remember that? The whole system was just flooded with these super risky loans. Today, the problem isn't bad debt. It's much simpler, and in a way, much harder to solve. There just aren't enough houses.
What's really pushing prices through the roof is something called structural scarcity. And all that really means is a deep, long-term shortage of homes. For years, literally for years, we just haven't been building enough houses to keep up with the number of people who need them. And that's created this huge hole in the inventory, which is why prices stay high even when not as many people are buying. And check out this number, 7.1 million. That is a huge number. That's how many affordable rental units we're short in the United States. And this really drives the point home, right? This scarcity problem isn't just about buying a house. It's locking people out of ownership and forcing a whole generation into a rental market that's already stretched to its breaking point. It's this vicious cycle of everything being too expensive. So what's the end result of all this? You get this massive, staggering gap between what people earn and what a house actually costs. I mean, look at this. In a state like California, you need to be making over 200 grand a year just for an average house. Now compare that to somewhere like Mississippi or West Virginia, and you really start to see just how different this crisis looks depending on where you live. Okay, so this brings us to the next big piece of the puzzle. If the average family is getting squeezed out of the market, then who is buying all the houses? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because this scarcity has thrown the doors wide open for a whole new set of very powerful players. First up, you've got the institutional investors. We're talking about huge hedge funds and massive corporations. These guys are playing with billions of dollars in cash, and they're just swooping in, snapping up single-family homes, and turning them into rental properties. They can outbid a regular family in a heartbeat, and a lot of times, they buy these houses before you or I even know they're for sale. It just makes the supply even tighter. But it's not just these big Wall Street funds. There's another major force at play. A ton of foreign money is pouring in, especially from Latin American investors who see the US dollar as a safe place to park their cash. And at the exact same time, back in those same countries, a totally different kind of buyer is showing up on the scene, one that's literally being created and paid for by the government. And this kind of direct government help, it's having an absolutely massive impact. So while home sales are slowing down in the US, they're just exploding in places like Colombia and Brazil. And it's all being driven by government money. You can't even really call this a free market in the classic sense. It's more like a state-sponsored market. So all of this leads us to the real architects of this market, the ones pulling the strings from behind the curtain. It's not just about you and me trying to buy a house anymore. The game is now being controlled by these huge institutions whose decisions create waves all around the world. And what you see is this really clear divide in philosophy, a fork in the road, really. In the US, the general idea is, hey, this is a problem for the private market to figure out. But in Latin America, it's a completely different story. Governments there see it as a social crisis that demands massive, direct state intervention. And sitting at the very top of this whole pyramid, you've got the central banks. They're like the ultimate market architects. Just think about the US Federal Reserve. When they crank up interest rates to fight inflation, boom! Mortgages get super expensive and millions of regular buyers are just knocked out of the game. But then, when they eventually decide to lower those rates, it's going to be like opening the floodgates of demand, right back into a market that still doesn't have enough homes. And here's a look at some of those government programs we were talking about. These are actively pouring fuel on the housing fire all across Latin America. You've got direct subsidies in Colombia and Brazil, government-built housing in Mexico. I mean, the state isn't just a referee on the sidelines here. It's the star player right in the middle of the action.
Okay, so we've kind of unpacked the mystery of why prices are high even though sales are low. So now what? Let's talk about the new playbook, the new rules of the game. Because make no mistake, this isn't some temporary blip. This is a fundamental, deep-down shift in how the entire real estate market works. So the biggest takeaway, the thing you really need to get, is this. Stop waiting for a crash to make everything normal again. That normal is gone. We are living through a permanent transformation right now. The market today is this incredibly complex, polarized thing, and it's being driven by forces that are so much bigger than just a family trying to buy a house.
So what does this new reality look like? Let's quickly run through 4 key trends you absolutely have to watch. First, nearshoring. That's companies moving their operations closer to home, which is creating brand new housing booms in places like Mexico. Second, investors are shifting their focus from buying one house to buying or building entire apartment buildings just for renters. Third, tech. AI and digitalization are now essential tools for everything from virtual tours to spotting the next hot market. And fourth, sustainability. Green homes aren't just a cute little niche anymore. They're a core demand, especially for younger generations. So, at the end of the day, it all comes down to understanding these new rules. That old traditional path to homeownership, save up for a down payment, buy a starter home. For a lot of people, that's fading away. It's just not the reality anymore. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. In a game where the rules are being written by giant investment funds and government policies, it's not just about how you'll manage to buy a home anymore. The real question is, how do you even begin to play in a market that, in many ways, just wasn't built for you?